Welcome to Casual Politics, Sir Malcolm. Thank you very much for accepting my request, and I'm very grateful to you.
My pleasure.
You need no introduction. You've been Secretary of State for Scotland under Margaret Thatcher during from 1986, and then you became Secretary for Defence from 1992 to 1995, and then following Lord Head's resignation, you became Foreign Secretary, and then when David Cameron became the Prime Minister, he appointed you as the Chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee. So my first question is, when was your most difficult moment in politics?
Well, it's quite difficult to pick out something. Each job has its own challenges
Yes.
and problems, but I think working with Margaret Thatcher was never easy because she had very strong opinions.
Yes.
And of course, Scotland was the part of the United Kingdom where the Conservative Party had least strength.
Yes.
So sometimes I had to try and persuade her not to be so enthusiastic for change, because that would be much more difficult to deliver. So I admired her enormously, but
Yes.
occasionally there were problems. I think the most difficult issues were when I was Minister of Defence, because when you are contemplating sending British military forces overseas, you have to accept that some of them may not come back. People will be killed, people will be injured. That's quite a heavy responsibility, and if you are the Minister of Defence, you have to be sure that the Prime Minister and your colleagues are aware of all these considerations.
You worked with Lady Thatcher and then also Sir John. So with which one of them it was more comfortable to work with?
Well, comfortable is
Yes.
That's a very easy question.
Yeah.
John Major is a very tough guy. He's a very able man, but he was a much more relaxed colleague. You had a much more straightforward and easy relationship. But then, of course, he was not the global leader that Margaret Thatcher became. I think if you are lucky enough to have the opportunity to work with someone who is a great national figure, a great international figure, then you have to accept that it may be also tense, it may be uncomfortable. The things that make people great sometimes make them insufferable.
Yes.
So because they're either absolutely right or sometimes they're terribly wrong, and you sometimes have the job of telling them they're wrong, and they don't necessarily want to hear that.
Yes, absolutely. And then when you were Secretary of State for Scotland, were there any questions of devolution in the mid-80s or not?
The issue never went away.
Yes.
But before I became Secretary of State, some years earlier, at the end of the previous Labour government in 1978, 79, there had been a referendum in Scotland on whether there should be a Scottish Parliament, a Scottish Assembly, and it did not go forward. That was not accepted. So the issue was much quieter at that time, but it was always there. And the other political parties either wanted independence, like the Nationalists,
Yes.
or wanted a Scottish Parliament, like the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats. So it was a difficult period.
And then now the Scotland. Do you think that the United Kingdom it will never be like as it was before?
It's a different kind of United Kingdom.
Yes.
We remain a United Kingdom. Britain will continue to be British. People will continue to be proud of their British citizenship.
Yes.
But what we have seen, and it's already happening, is a more decentralised system of government, closer to a federal system, closer to the systems you already have in many other countries, in the United States, in Canada, Australia, Germany. Countries are not, but it's unusual for Britain because for many centuries we had a single parliament, single government for the whole country, and that is not as easy to justify in a modern society when people are anxious to have more local control of their affairs.
And now let's change the subject to Iraq. Why did you vote for another intervention in Iraq in September?
So far as the current air activity there,
Yes.
for a very special reason, because it was not just a British initiative. The international community, many countries, including the Arab countries
Yes.
of the region, all take the view that the people who now control northern Iraq and parts of northern Syria
Yes.
are essentially members of a terrorist organization.
Absolutely.
They are not just interested in controlling a piece of territory. They want to export international terrorism to kill innocent people. They are particularly savage in the methods they use. They are a massive source of destabilization. And so the international community of which Britain is part have felt that we have to help the Iraqi government try to recover the territory in the north of their country so that it will not be controlled by terrorists and their supporters.
And did the government think that they were let down by those rebels that they provided them with actually arms, and now they're fighting against them?
I'm not sure what your question is referring to. You have to.
Foreign Secretary.
We're talking about Iraq, are we?
Yes, William Hague, when he was a Foreign Secretary,
yes.
he provided arms to those rebels, and now those rebels.
To which rebels?
Those that jihadis that now they joined the ISIS. So.
I'm sorry, I don't know who has told you that. That is not true. Britain has never provided arms to rebels.
In Syria, it didn't?
Well, I thought, first of all, you said you were talking about Iraq.
Yes, but in Syria, and then from Syria they went to Iraq, so because...
Well, no, I understand your point better now, but
Yes.
it's not a very good argument to use, if you'll forgive me, because Britain has never directly provided arms in Syria in the way that you have suggested. There was a proposal that Britain should be more supportive of the Free Syrian Army and the moderate Syrian opposition. The United Kingdom, at the end of the day, never gave more than non-lethal help. They gave a lot of economic help, a lot of advice, a lot of equipment, but not military weapons. Other countries did provide weapons, that's a separate matter. There was a discussion as to whether we should provide weapons to the moderate Syrian opposition. I was myself one of the people who said that might be justifiable, but that did not become government policy.
It didn't. And now it's why we don't let the region to fight actually the war, because Saudis, they got actually 5 planes that you and Mauricio Petito, when you were defense secretary, you sold to them 5 planes. And then, so they've got 5 planes. So why they can't fight the war without the West?
Well, it's, first of all, this is an international challenge.
Yes.
The terrorists in northern Iraq and northern Syria are not just a threat to these countries, they're a threat to the international community. They support terrorism not just in North Africa and the Middle East, but also terrorist attacks in Western Europe and elsewhere. So we all have to play a part in dealing with that. Now, the British government and other European governments, Western governments, have said we're not going to send troops on the ground. That is not going to be our contribution, will be the provision of air power, and we will give help to the Iraqi army and to the Kurdish Peshmerga, who are carrying out the responsibilities on the ground. That is, I think, a good division of responsibility.
And you're also the chairman of the Intelligence Security Select Committee. So, and those who go actually to Syria and Iraq to join the jihadis, how the government actually will prevent them to come back to the United Kingdom?
Well, it depends on whether they are British citizens. It depends on whether they still have a desire to carry out terrorist acts. People who have gone to Syria are very foolish, very stupid. Some realize very quickly that they have been fooled, that they are being used by the terrorists for very evil purposes, and so they wish to return home. Now, that if they have genuinely come to the decision that they must respect the law and not carry out terrorist acts, then of course we are very pleased about that. But you have to be very careful. You don't know for certain whether these are people who have genuinely changed their mind, or whether they are pretending to have changed their mind in order to be able to come back to Britain, but then carry out terrorist acts when they're here. So you have to have a series of ways in which you can make sure that the public interest is being safeguarded and that people will not be exposed to terrorist plots. Each year in Britain we have had, sadly, terrorist attempts to kill people, to destroy parts of this country, and we've been successful most of the time in preventing that happening, but you must always be very vigilant.
Is it true that actually your committee has said that social media like Facebook, they actually a safe haven for terrorists?
Well, we were talking about a particular problem. We did an investigation into the murder of Lee Rigby, the British soldier who was killed in the streets of Woolwich. and we were trying to identify whether that could have been stopped. And we discovered that there was a message that one of the murderers, Adebowale, sent 5 months before the murder. He sent a message on Facebook to someone in the Middle East saying how he wanted to kill a British soldier and discussing how he might do that. And obviously, if that message had been made known to the British authorities at the time, action could have been taken to prevent Adebowale and his colleague from carrying out the terrible murder that they did in May of that year. So we have been criticizing Facebook, but not just Facebook. It's a number of United States-based communications providers who do monitor the use of their systems and sometimes close down accounts if they find someone is using Facebook for child exploitation or for terrorist purposes. They close down these accounts. That's good, but they have not passed on that information to the British government, to the police or to the authorities. And that is the reason why we said that if they are not prepared to cooperate as good citizens, then sadly terrorists take advantage of that.
And some argue that intelligence agencies, they're more powerful than web firms to stop terrorists. For example, the example of you, Rigby, for example, even though that the web firms, they wanted to report them, but they didn't have technological capabilities as they got intelligence agencies.
Intelligence agencies in a democratic country like Britain,
Yes.
first of all, can't do what they like. They have to, first of all, act under the law. They have to get lawful authority to use the technical skills they have to find information. But they must also, to a very considerable extent, to succeed, have the cooperation of the information companies, of the telecommunications companies. Because if terrorists are sending emails or using voicemail or social media, then if you have the cooperation of the telecommunication companies, then it becomes possible to find out what they are up to, what they're trying to do.
And Sir Malcolm, you know better than me that now people, they're very concerned about this issue, and they say that, and they got a feeling, a sense that the government is spying them. What is your response to that?
Well, I don't think most people do think that. That is what Mr. Snowden suggested, an American guy who stole vast numbers of...
But Shabby Shabgamati, this...
Yeah, sure, she runs a lobby that's what she says all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It's ridiculous, in fact, because why should GCHQ or MI6 or MI5 be interested in your emails? Why should they be interested in the emails or the Facebook entries or anything of that kind? The vast majority of people, their job is to find terrorists,
Yes.
to find serious criminals.
Yes.
Now, sometimes when they are trying to find who the terrorists are, they have to have some sort of analysis of the material that's going through the internet in order to target the people who are the bad guys, the evil guys, but they do that under very strict control. And whenever they find anything that is not relevant to a criminal or a terrorist, it's discarded, it's not read, it's not looked at.
Yes.
And that's a very important safeguard. Now, I think people who make silly criticisms, like saying we're all under surveillance, it's just absurd.
Okay. So do you think that the government is doing a good job in...
Well, no government is perfect.
Yes.
The committee that I chair, the Intelligence Committee, is not part of the government. When the intelligence agencies do something foolish, we criticise them.
Yes.
And that's right and proper in a democracy. But we're not prepared to simply go because Shami Chakrabarti or Mr. Snowden
Yes.
says that the whole population are having their emails read. That's just ridiculous.
And now, again, back to Scotland issue. So do you, are you in favour of that? Only English MPs vote on English matters?
Well, I think we've got to do it. There is a problem, and it's a question of having an outcome which is fair to everyone.
Yes.
The Scots, the Welsh, the Northern Irish now have the last say on matters that only affect their part of the United Kingdom. So what we're all having to look at is how can we achieve something similar for people in England, given that there isn't an English Parliament, and the House of Commons is the Parliament of Britain, but it also deals with all the English issues. So I think that what we need to do is change the way in which the House of Commons operate, so that although, in my personal view, everyone should be able to speak and vote, at the end of the day, if a proposal only affects England, it should not go forward unless the majority of the MPs from England support that proposal. Now, how we do that, that's for discussion. But I think there has to be some change to take into account that we now have devolution for 3 of the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. You cannot exclude the 4th country, which happens to be the largest, from the same sort of decentralization approach.
And some people say that England should have its own assembly. Do you?
No, I think that would be foolish because it would be hugely expensive to have an English Parliament and a British Parliament. England is, in population terms, England is 85% of Britain. So to have a whole new building and MPs and so forth would be very silly. When the English agree what they want, then they always get what they want because they are the vast majority of MPs in the House of Commons. The problem only arises when the English themselves are divided, deeply divided, and then you occasionally could have a situation where MPs from Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland could decide the outcome. So that can sometimes create a sense of unfairness, and it's that limited problem that we need to address. So you don't take a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's a good English expression and it's relevant,
Absolutely. Sir Malcolm, you've been in Parliament for more than 40 years. So
well, I was out for part of that time. I lost my seat in '97.
Yes, but altogether.
Then I came back.
Yes, altogether. And altogether, you've been in Parliament for more than 40 years in politics. So how do you regard politics today? What has it changed from the 60s and 70s? Political parties?
There are some very big changes.
Yes.
But ultimately, politics is about priorities. In a democracy, it's about deciding you can't do everything. There's a limited amount of money available. There's a limited amount of time to introduce new laws or get rid of old laws. So you have to decide what are the main problems facing our society. How are the ways in which we can make the society better for all of us, have a better life, more security, and what is the contribution we can make to other parts of the world that may help them when they're struggling with similar issues? Because we're a lucky country. We're one of the more wealthy countries in the world. We've had internal peace for hundreds of years. If you're lucky like that, you have to try and see what you can do to help others.
And my last question is that why are you confident that your party will win the next general election?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, so if you say, am I 100% certain? Of course I'm not. I don't know. That's for you and the electorate and all of us to decide. But I think it's likely that we will continue as a government for this reason. The biggest issue at a general election tends to be the economy. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? If it's getting better, which the economy is in Britain, we have more growth than any other country in Europe or the Western world. We have unemployment has been falling dramatically now for a year. Inflation is low. We have some problems with the deficit, but most of the economic indicators are very positive. So people tend to say, well, why risk that? That's what's the Labour Party got to offer that would be likely to make the economy better? And it's also, people also say, who do we want as Prime Minister? And I think David Cameron has shown, he's not perfect, he's made mistakes, but he wears the burdens of office quite lightly. He seems to be able to carry out the task of Prime Minister in quite an impressive way. For whatever reason, Mr Miliband does not seem to attract the same enthusiasm, and that will be relevant.
Sir Malcolm, thank you very much for your clarity in all of your answers, and I'm very grateful to you that you accepted my
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.